I want you to listen to this, because here's Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz got the biggest applause line of the night. He avoided a question. I can't even remember what it was. It's about the budget deal. This is fascinating because I thought Ted Cruz this is the guy who had basically been rallying the conservatives in the House to vote against Boehner, to vote against a budget deal like this. He didn't want to address it at all. He didn't want to address it at all because it was a failure and a loss on his part. And he was very successful in somehow getting through the night without anybody tagging him with that. Because that was supposed to be his calling card, right? He was supposed to be the shadow majority leader in the House, and this guy's in the Senate. So instead of answering the question about the deal, what he does is he goes off on a rant against the media, and we're going to compare two rants against the media, and then we'll talk about it. Here's the first one. This is Ted Cruz at the debate last night ranting on the moderators. And if you notice, he also does a backhanded insult to every single other person on the stage in the guise of saying, I'm going to defend you, because he's bringing up insults that weren't even articulated at the debate and frankly stuck. Here we go.
Senator Cruz, congressional Republicans, Democrats, and the White House are about to strike a compromise that would raise the debt limit, prevent a government shutdown, and calm financial markets. That fear of another Washington-created crisis is on the way. Does your opposition to it show that you're not the kind of problem solver American voters want?
You know, let me say something at the outset. The questions that have been asked so far in this debate illustrate why the American people don't trust the media.
Pause it for 1 second. Okay, so he's just gotten an incredibly substantive question, which is, what are your feelings about this deal? The tone of it was a little bit weird because it was really more like, do you have a good personality for this stuff? But this is an opportunity for him to address it. And instead, he goes this way. Good.
This is not a cage match. And you look at the questions. Donald Trump, are you a comic book villain? Ben Carson, can you do math? John Kasich, will you insult two people over here? Marco Rubio, why don't you resign? Jeb Bush, why have your numbers fallen? How about talking about the substantive issues people care about?
Does this count? Do we get credit for this one?
And Carl, I'm not finished yet. The contrast with the Democratic debate, where every fawning question from the media was, which of you is more handsome and wise?
All right, so there it is. Now
he is the perfect modern embodiment down to the look and the voice of McCarthy. It's amazing. The grievance politics, I mean, he says it. It's not that the other guys don't do it, but he says it more convincingly to the point where I almost believe he believes his own crap.
Now, does that response remind you of another response that we heard in 2012 that ended up shooting this guy up into the polls? And that guy is Newt Gingrich. This is
when he attacked what's his name at Fox,
Chris Wallace,
only non-white. No, wasn't it? Was it Chris Wallace?
Oh no, what's
his name?
It was. I think it was Juan Gonzalez.
Juan Williams.
Was it Chris Wallace? All right, it was Chris Wallace. This is from 2011 in an Iowa debate in August of 2011. Let's hear Newt Gingrich's. And I'll tell you something. This is the thing that made Newt Gingrich a player in that race.
Thank you. Speaker Gingrich, one of the ways that we judge a candidate is the campaign they run. In June, almost your entire national campaign staff resigned, along with your staff here in Iowa. They said that you were undisciplined in campaigning and fundraising, and at last report, you're $1 million in debt. How do you respond to people who say that your campaign has been a mess so far?
Well, let me say, first of all, Chris, that I took seriously Brett's injunction to put aside the talking points, and I wish you would put aside the gotcha questions. Like Ronald Reagan, who had 13 senior staff resign the morning of the New Hampshire primary, and whose new campaign manager laid off 100 people because he had no money, because the consultants had spent it. Like John McCain, who had to go and run an inexpensive campaign because the consultants spent it. I intend to run on ideas, Congress should come back Monday. They should repeal the Dodd-Frank bill. They should repeal Sarbanes-Oxley. They should repeal Obamacare. They should institute Lean Six Sigma across the entire federal government. A hard idea for Washington reporters to cover, but an important idea because it's the key to American manufacturing success. I'd love to see the rest of tonight's debate asking us about what we would do to lead an America whose president has failed to lead instead of playing Mickey Mouse games.
So there you have it. And
but don't you also hear Donald Trump in that?
Yes.
He may not always go directly after the media, although he does that sometimes.
And
too.
he did it last night.
Unfairly. Right, they're treating him unfairly, blah, blah, blah. But he picks on very popular, easy groups to sort of throw out conspiracies about, and makes it into a big left-wing thing. Whatever group is criticizing him, whatever organization. Again, this is that resentment politics that's all these guys can do, which is we're poor white guys and our lives have been tough.
You know what? I'll tell you something.
Us.
This is this is exactly why I think Rubio is not going to be the nominee and why I think Ted Cruz is. Because people are saying that Marco Rubio, he showed that he was an everyman, that he could connect to the Republican people by talking about his dad and his mom who was a cleaning lady and his dad who worked at a bartender or whatever it was. And that's not what connects with the Republican primary voter.
No, he'll never be an everyman to them because he's not like them.
Well, even despite the fact that Rubio and Cruz, right, they both have Latino last names. Cruz, he talks about this sense of being maligned and not being able to sort of express himself, and how he's being unfairly picked upon, and that is what resonates with the everyman in the Republican Party.
That's a big part of it. I also would throw in Cruz. One of Cruz's parents is not Hispanic. He was born in Canada, his family's not from Cuba. I think. Or maybe I don't know where they're originally from. Oh, no, they are from Cuba, aren't they? But he was born in Canada, and I think that the connotation that's I don't know. He doesn't he never supported initially as he talked about immigration.
He just hasn't associated himself with.
He never associated himself with anything Hispanic, and the way Rubio, who's from the Miami area, and the Cuban family story has been a big part of his story. Whereas when Cruz tells his story, it's all about how his dad went from being a lefty to being a righty, and how smart that was.
Right.
It's he's made it a big part of his identity, Rubio, and that's not what people who are not like him here, who are core Republicans, identify with. They identify much more with Cruz's story because there's a lot of them, in rural areas, whites who were once FDR Democrats back when social issues didn't exist, back when you could leave, African Americans out of Social Security because that's what you needed to do initially to get it passed. So you left farmers and domestic workers out of it because that's how you got the Southerners, Southern senators in the Democratic Party to support it. So you had this long line of, and it still happened in more recent years in places north of the Mason-Dixon line, in rural areas of places like Ohio, where you have people that as recently as 20 years ago, 15 years ago, were still calling themselves Democrats and now are Republicans. And so I think Cruz's story works much better, his sort of creation story, if you will, than Rubio's identifying with immigration and identifying with Cuba and and Miami and all of that. And I think you'll see a lot of that used against him. So I still, even whatever Adelson and Rubio's got a lot of talent when he as a speaker, but Cruz, even though he's not quite as talented as a speaker, he's got their kind of charisma, as you were just saying. He has got the victimization thing down.
And he's got the Jesus juice. I mean, after Ben Carson drops out, I think you're going to see the fundamentalists start to rally around Ted Cruz. Now,
that's right. I mean, it's always the second, whether it's about guns, he makes it so people are infringing on the rights of people like him, right? With guns. On gay marriage, remember how he made it about it's the religious victimization thing. You don't hear Rubio talking a lot about those things. Cruz is there for every one of those, where, poor people like Cruz who are just trying to live their life in a God-fearing and forward way are victimized. They have to accept they have to make a cake for a gay couple, and they have to accept that these immigrants are coming in here illegally, and that women and what's going on in Planned Parenthood, women have these rights. And, he plays that white male victimization perfectly. I've said it for a while now, and I thought Rubio was going to be the establishment choice, and I'm not bragging because I get a hell of a lot of stuff wrong, but this has played out similarly to how I thought it would, that Rubio would eventually, because he's the most talented of the people vying for that, but ultimately I think that Cruz prevails. And it's frightening because I don't care who our nominee is, we better not lose that race, or this country will.
I mean, look, they're about to nominate somebody. It's either going to be, I don't think it's going to be Ben Carson. It's either going to be Donald Trump or Cruz or Rubio. And two of those three have said no exceptions for rape or incest when it comes to abortions. Good effing luck with that.